we cover. This is, of course, spontaneous human combustion, and I'm excited to learn more about it. Before we begin, I'd love to quickly remind you that you can watch all of my ASMR uploads on Patreon without those pesky YouTube advertisements, if you want to support me, of course. Now, let's learn together and relax and chill out. Spontaneous human combustion is the pseudo-scientific concept of the spontaneous combustion of a living or recently deceased human body without an apparent external source of ignition on the body. In addition to reported cases, descriptions of the alleged phenomenon appear in literature, and both types have been observed to share common characteristics in terms of circumstance and the remains of the victim. Scientific investigations have attempted to analyze reported instances of SCH and have resulted in hypotheses regarding potential causes and mechanisms, including victim behavior and habits, alcohol consumption, and proximity to potential sources of ignition, as well as the behavior of fires that consume melted fats. Natural explanations, as well as unverified natural phenomena, have been proposed to explain reports of SHC. The current scientific consensus is that purported cases of SHC involve overlooked external sources of ignition. Now let's look at the overview. Spontaneous human combustion refers to the death from a fire originating without an apparent external source of ignition. A belief that the fire starts within the body of the victim. This idea and the term spontaneous human combustion were both first proposed in 1746 by Paul Rowley musicians and writers believed spontaneous human combustion was the result of alcoholism. Now to scientific investigation. An extensive 2.5-year research project involving 30 historical cases of alleged SHC from 1725 to 1982 was conducted by scientific investigator Joe Nickel and forensic analyst John F. Fisher. Their lengthy 2-part report was published in 1984 in the Journal of the International Association of Arson Investigators and incorporated into their 1988 book Secrets of the Supernatural. Nickel has written frequently on the subject, appeared on television documentaries, conducted additional research, and lectured at the New York State Academy of Fire Science at Montour Falls, New York, as a guest instructor. The Nickel and Fisher investigation, which looked at cases in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, showed that the burned cadavers were close to plausible sources for the ignition. Candles, lamps, fireplaces, and so on. Some sources were often omitted from published accounts of these incidents, presumably to deepen the aura of mystery surrounding an apparently spontaneous death. The investigation also found that there was a correlation between alleged SHC deaths and the victim's intoxication or other forms of incapacitation, which could conceivably have caused them to be careless and unable to respond properly to an accident. Where the destruction of the body was not particularly extensive, a primary source of combustible fuel could plausibly have been the victim's clothing or a covering, such as a blanket or comforter. However, where the destruction was extensive, additional fuel sources were involved, such as chair stuffing, floor coverings, the flooring itself, and the like. The investigators described how such materials helped to retain melted fat, which caused more of the body to be burned and destroyed, yielding still more liquefied fat in a cyclic process known as the wick effect or the candle effect. According to the Nickel and Fisher investigation, nearby objects often remain undamaged because fire tends to burn upward, but burns laterally with some difficulty. The fires in question are relatively small, achieving considerable destruction by the wick effect, and nearby objects may not be close enough to catch fire themselves, much as one can close skepticism about spontaneous combustion. In a 2002 study, Angie M. Christensen of the University of Tennessee cremated both healthy and osteoporotic samples of human bone and compared the resulting color changes and fragmentation. The study found that osteoporotic bone samples consistently displayed more discoloration and a greater degree of fragmentation than healthy ones. The same study found when human tissue is burned, the resulting flame produces a small amount of heat, indicating that fire is unlikely to spread from burning tissue. Now to the suggested explanations. This is the bit which to me is the most interesting. The scientific consensus is that incidents which might appear as spontaneous combustion did in fact have an external source of ignition, and that spontaneous human combustion without an external ignition source is extremely implausible. Pseudoscientific hypotheses have been presented which attempt to explain how SHC might occur without an external flame source. Benjamin Radford, science writer and deputy editor of the science magazine Skeptical Inquirer, casts doubt on the plausibility of spontaneous human combustion. If SHC is a real phenomenon and not the result of an elderly or infirm person being too close to a flame source, why doesn't it happen more often? There are 8 billion people in the world today in 2024, and yet we don't see reports of people bursting into flame while walking down the street, attending football games, or sipping a coffee at a local Starbucks. A very reasonable point. Now to natural explanations. Almost all postulated cases of SHC involve people with low mobility due to advanced age or obesity, along with poor health. Victims show a high likelihood of having died in their sleep or of having been unable to move once they had caught fire. Smoking is often seen as a source of fire. Natural causes such as heart attacks may lead to the victim dying, subsequently dropping the cigarette, which, after a period of smouldering, can ignite the victim's clothes. Okay. And the wick effect we talked about before. This hypothesis suggests that a small external flame source such as a burning cigarette chars the clothing of the victim at a location, splitting the skin and releasing subcutaneous fat. It's a very interesting idea, which is in turn absorbed into the burning clothing, acting as a wick. Like the fat in the candle going into the fibre of the wick. That's an interesting and weird comparison to candle especially on windows. Feet don't typically burn because they often have the least fat. Hands also have little fat, but may burn if resting on the abdomen, which provides all the necessary fat for combustion. A little bit graphic, but quite interesting in theory. Brian J. Ford has suggested that ketosis, possibly caused by alcoholism or low-carb dieting, produces acetone, which is highly flammable and could therefore lead to apparently spontaneous combustion. It's an interesting idea. Another important variable. Sometimes there are reasonable explanations for the deaths, but proponents ignore official autopsies and contradictory evidence in favor of anecdotal accounts and personal testimonies. And now two examples. And we have a death scene which I'm not going to show you because it is a little bit graphic. On the 2nd of July 1951, Mary Reeser, a 67-year-old woman, was found burned to death in her house in St. Petersburg, Florida, after her landlady noted that the house's doorknob was unusually warm. The landlady notified the police, and upon entering the home, they found Reeser's remains completely burned into ash, with only one leg remaining. The chair she was sitting in was destroyed. Reeser had taken sleeping pills and had also been a smoker. Despite its proliferation in popular culture, the contemporary FBI investigation ruled out the possibility of SHC. A common theory was that she was smoking a cigarette after taking sleeping pills and then fell asleep while still holding the burning cigarette, which could have ignited her gown, leading to her death. Her daughter-in-law stated the cigarette dropped to her lap. Her fat was the fuel that kept her burning. The floor was cement, and the chair was by itself. There was nothing around her to burn. Another case. Margaret Hogan, an 89-year-old widow who lived alone in a house on Prussia Street, Dublin, Ireland, was found burned almost to the point of complete destruction. On the 28th of May, 1970, plastic flowers on a table in the center of the room had been reduced to liquid, and a television with a melted screen sat 12 feet from the armchair in which the ashen remains were found. Otherwise, the surroundings were almost untouched. Her 2 feet and both legs from below the knees were undamaged. I wasn't really aware of that as an idea, and that's a tidbit from this Wikipedia that I'll be storing in the back of my mind